The great hall of Velthus Prime stretched so far that its ceiling disappeared into artificial clouds. Hyun-Woo Kang sat in the human section, a small corner near the back, and watched as thousands of alien beings argued about things that happened before their grandparents were born. His notebook was already half full of observations, corrections, and quiet frustrations. The Grand Archive's centennial debate happened once every 100 years. Species from across the galaxy sent their best scholars to discuss the greatest mystery of all: the Precursors. These ancient beings had left ruins on 1,000 worlds, technology that even now nobody fully understood, and then vanished without a trace. Every species had theories. Most of them were wrong. "They're still using the Velthian drift calculations," Ji-Won Park whispered beside him. She was his colleague, a physicist who specialized in quantum mechanics and had a talent for spotting mathematical errors from across a room. "The numbers don't work. They haven't worked for 3 presentations now." "I know," Hyun-Woo said quietly. "Not yet." Ji-Won frowned but stayed silent. She had worked with Hyun-Woo long enough to trust his timing, even when she didn't understand it. On the central platform, a massive creature with 6 arms and crystalline skin was speaking. This was Archon Velthara, perhaps the most respected precursor scholar in the known galaxy. She had spent 400 years studying the ancient ruins, had published 17 books, and had personally excavated sites on 40 different worlds. When she spoke, the entire hall listened. "The evidence is clear and has been verified by independent teams across 17 worlds," Velthara announced, her voice echoing through translation devices. "The precursor civilization collapsed exactly 47.3 million years ago. The stellar drift patterns, the radioactive decay in the artifacts, the geological evidence at every site all point to the same conclusion. This is not theory. This is fact." The hall erupted in agreement. Beings of every shape and size made noises of approval in their various ways. Screens lit up with data supporting her claim. Holographic charts floated through the air, all showing the same timeline. 47 million years. It was the number that every textbook printed, every student learned, every scientist accepted. Hyun-Woo made another note in his book. The number 940 was circled several times. A representative from the Kryn Empire stood next. He was tall and imposing, wearing robes that marked him as Hierophant Raxil, leader of their historical society. "The Archon speaks truth," he declared. "Our ancestors have known this for 10,000 years. The precursors were divine beings who created the foundations of galactic civilization before ascending to a higher plane of existence. They did not die. They transcended." More agreement rippled through the crowd. The religious interpretation was popular among several species. It was cleaner than imagining the mighty precursors simply dying out. A smaller alien, resembling something between a bird and a lizard, spoke next. "But what caused their departure? In all our centuries of study, we've never found evidence of war, plague, or natural disaster on that scale." "Perhaps that is the point," Velthara responded. "They left because they chose to leave. They had evolved beyond the need for physical form. The timing 47 million years ago coincides with the end of the Great Silence in our galactic fossil record. They simply moved on." Grinned. Hyun-Woo looked at Ji-Won. She was gripping her seat, clearly wanting to speak. He touched her arm gently and shook his head. She took a deep breath and stayed quiet. The debate continued for hours. Speaker after speaker presented variations on the same themes. The precursors left 47 million years ago. They were advanced beyond comprehension. They seeded the galaxy with technology and then departed for reasons unknown. It was all very neat, very academic, and very wrong. Finally, during a brief pause, Hyun-Woo raised his hand. At first, nobody noticed. The human delegation was small and sat far from the main floor. Earth had only been part of the galactic community for 300 years, a blink of an eye compared to species that had been spacefaring for tens of thousands of years. Humans were tolerated at these gatherings, but rarely taken seriously. Hyunwoo raised his hand higher. An assistant moderator, a floating being of pure energy contained in a geometric shell, finally noticed. It seemed almost annoyed. The chair recognizes the human delegation? The hall fell quiet, but not the respectful quiet that had greeted Archon Velthara. This was the quiet of curiosity mixed with condescension. What could humans possibly add to a debate that had been ongoing for millennia? Hyunwoo stood. He was average height by human standards, with glasses that he didn't really need, but wore out of habit. He had spent 20 years preparing for this moment, but his voice was calm and steady. Thank you. My name is Dr. Hyunwoo Kang, and I'm an archaeologist and linguist from Earth. I've been listening to the presentations with great interest, and I believe I've identified a significant error in the established timeline. Murmurs spread through the hall. Velthara's crystalline features somehow conveyed amusement. An error? Young scholar, this timeline has been verified by thousands of independent researchers over thousands of years. What error could you possibly have found? Your dating is off by a factor of approximately 940, Hyunwoo said simply. The murmurs turned into gasps and shouts. Hierophant Raxil stood abruptly. This is insulting. The human makes a mockery of serious scholarship. I assure you. I'm quite serious, Hyunwoo replied. He gestured, and a holographic display appeared above him, showing complex mathematical equations. The problem is in your stellar drift calculations. You've been measuring the positions of stars relative to the precursor sites and calculating backward to determine when those sites were active. The mathematics is sound, but it's based on an incomplete model. Velthara leaned forward, her amusement fading into something more analytical. Explain. Ji-won stood beside Hyunwoo, her fingers flying across a portable terminal. New calculations appeared in the air. The standard drift calculation assumes uniform galactic rotation, she said. But 50 years ago, Earth scientists discovered that galactic rotation has differential bands similar to how Jupiter's atmosphere moves at different speeds at different latitudes. When you account for this differential and recalculate the stellar positions, the timeline shifts dramatically. Hyunwoo finished. The precursors didn't disappear 47 million years ago. They disappeared approximately 50,000 years ago. The recent has not. Thereabout dot. The rected. The recent hasn't has bound. The recent hasn't has not. The silence that followed was absolute. 50,000 years. It was impossibly recent. Many species had recorded histories going back that far. If the precursors had been around that recently, it changed everything. Impossible, someone shouted. The radioactive decay measurements are calibrated based on the stellar drift timeline, G1 interrupted. If the drift calculations are wrong, the calibration is wrong. We've reanalyzed samples from 3 precursor sites using Earth-based quantum decay methods. They all date to between 48 and 52,000 years ago. Hyunwoo pulled up more data. Furthermore, if the precursors vanished only 50,000 years ago rather than 50 million, it explains several anomalies that researchers have noted but couldn't account for. The preservation level of certain artifacts. The presence of organic compounds that shouldn't have survived 50 million years. The distribution pattern of ruins across the galaxy. Velthara was no longer amused. She was studying the equations with intense focus, her multiple arms moving rapidly across her own terminal. Minutes passed as the hall waited in stunned silence. Finally, she looked up. The mathematics appears sound, she said slowly. But the implications are disturbing, Hyunwoo agreed. If the precursors disappeared 50,000 years ago rather than 50 million, and if they disappeared quickly rather than gradually, then we need to ask different questions. Not why did they leave, but what happened to them. And, more importantly, he paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. Could it happen again? The hall erupted into chaos. The debate hall had not calmed down in 3 days. News of the human challenge to the accepted timeline had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Some called it revolutionary. Others called it heresy. The Galactic Council demanded proof, and they demanded it quickly. Hyunwoo sat in a small conference room adjacent to the main hall, surrounded by skeptical alien scientists. Archon Velthara was there too, her crystalline features unreadable as she reviewed the human data for what must have been the 100th time. Despite her initial shock, she had proven to be more interested in truth than in being right. "Your mathematics is correct," Velthara admitted, and several aliens in the room made sounds of protest. She raised 2 of her 6 hands for silence. "I have checked it thoroughly. The differential galactic rotation model is elegant and explains discrepancies we've observed but never fully understood. However," she fixed her gaze on Hyunwoo, "mathematics alone will not convince the galaxy. We need physical evidence. A precursor site that definitively dates to 50,000 years ago, not 50 million. We have one," Hyunwoo said quietly. The room went silent. "Impossible," Hierophant Raxel said from the corner where he stood with arms crossed. "We have searched for 100,000 years. Every site is ancient beyond measure. If there were better preserved sites, we would have found them." Ji-won smiled slightly. "You've been searching in the wrong places. You've been looking on old worlds, established planets where civilizations have existed for millions of years. But if the precursors disappeared only 50,000 years ago, they might have left facilities in places that weren't worth visiting 50 million years ago." "Such as?" Veltara asked. "Such as the Kuiper Belt in our home solar system," Hyunwoo said. "A barren moon orbiting a dwarf planet that nobody thought to look at carefully because there's no reason for anything to be there. Except we found something. A precursor facility, perfectly preserved in ice." The room erupted again, but this time with excited questions, rather than angry denials. Velthara stood. "How long have you known about this?" "We discovered it 4 years ago," Hyunwoo admitted. "We've been studying it, verifying our findings, making sure we understood what we had before bringing it to the galactic community." "And you kept it secret?" Raxel demanded. "We kept it careful," Ji-won corrected. "Would you have listened to us 4 years ago if we'd simply announced we'd found a 50,000-year-old precursor base in our own backyard? Or would you have dismissed it as human arrogance?" Nobody answered, which was answer enough. 2 weeks later, a fleet of ships hung in space near the frozen moon. The human research vessel Persistent led the way, commanded by Captain Dong-Hyun Lee, a veteran of Earth's deep space exploration program. Behind it were ships from a dozen different species, all carrying scientists who had demanded to see the evidence for themselves. Hyunwoo stood on the Persistence bridge, watching the moon grow larger on the view screen. Beside him, Dr. Haewon Choi checked her equipment for the 3rd time. She was a xenobiologist who specialized in ancient genetic samples, and if there was any organic material left in the facility, she would be the one to analyze it. "Approaching landing zone," Captain Dong-hyun announced. "Weather is clear. Temperature is negative 230 degrees. Just another beautiful day in the Kuiper Belt." The ships descended toward a crater that looked like any other crater on any other lifeless rock. But as they got closer, subtle details became visible. The crater was too perfectly circular. The shadows fell in patterns that suggested artificial structures beneath the ice. They landed in carefully coordinated positions, and work crews began the delicate process of excavating the entrance. It took 8 hours of careful drilling and melting before they broke through to the facility beneath. Hyunwoo was among the first to enter. His suit lights illuminated a corridor that had not been seen in 50,000 years. Unlike every other precursor site in the galaxy, which were ruins of ruins, this place was pristine. The walls were smooth. The floor was level. And most incredibly, small lights began to flicker on as they walked, responding to their presence with power systems that had somehow survived 50 millennia. "This is impossible," breathed an alien scientist, a Velthesian researcher who had studied under Archon Velthara herself. "The preservation level," It's as if they left yesterday. Not yesterday, Hay1 said, checking her instruments. But definitely not millions of years ago. The ice preserved everything. No weathering, no geological activity, no cosmic radiation damage. It's perfect. They moved deeper into the facility. The corridors opened into larger rooms filled with equipment that still looked functional. There were workstations with intact displays, storage chambers with sealed containers, and something that looked like a massive data archive. In one room, they found what made everyone stop and stare. A chamber with 47 different writing systems carved into the walls. G1 stepped forward, her translator device working overtime. "These are warnings," she said quietly. "In 47 different languages. Some I recognize: Proto-Kryn, Ancient Velthesian, Early Navari, but this one," she pointed to a section of wall with pictographic script. "This is Proto-Human hieroglyphics, the kind found in Earth's oldest archaeological sites." Raxiel, who had insisted on joining the expedition, moved closer. "The Precursors knew human writing? That's impossible. Humans are barely evolved." "Or," Hyunwoo said carefully, "the Precursors had contact with early humanity. Direct contact." Hay1 had moved to a different chamber, one that appeared to be a biological storage facility. She worked in silence for several minutes before calling out, "I need everyone to see this. Everyone. I need everyone to see this." They gathered around as she displayed her findings. The storage units contained genetic samples, thousands of them, each carefully labeled and preserved. But what made the room fall silent was the analysis. "These aren't samples from one species," Hay1 explained. "They're from hundreds of species. I'm seeing genetic markers for Velthesians, Kryn, Navari, dozens of others. And," she paused, "human DNA. Or rather, proto-human DNA. The ancestors of modern humans. The Precursors weren't a single species," Hyunwoo said, understanding flooding through him. "They were a coalition, a gathering of hundreds of different species working together." "But working on what?" Velthara asked. She had joined them remotely via hologram, watching the exploration from her ship. What were they doing here? G1 had found the data archive and was working to access it. The Precursor systems were sophisticated, but they seemed designed to be understood eventually. Perhaps they had wanted to be found. After an hour of careful work, she managed to activate a playback system. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a three-dimensional recording. The being that appeared was humanoid, but not human, with features that suggested a blending of multiple species. When it spoke, the translation systems struggled but managed to convey meaning. "If you are watching this, then our efforts to preserve this information have succeeded. We are the final coalition. The last organized resistance against what we have come to call the Silence. We represent 473 species from across the galaxy, united in desperate purpose." The hologram changed, showing star maps with sections marked in red. "The Silence began at the galactic rim 30,000 years ago. It is not a species, not a weapon in any conventional sense. It is an absence. Worlds go dark, stars disappear from sensors, and nothing comes back." More images flowed past. Fleets of ships, vanishing. Planets with all life, simply gone. Empty space, where solar systems should have been. We have fought for 28,000 years. We have lost. This facility is one of many we have hidden throughout the galaxy, each containing our accumulated knowledge, our technology, and our final gift to those who come after. We have seeded primitive worlds with the tools they will need, encoded in ruins and artifacts that will seem ancient even to civilizations that arise thousands of years from now. The hologram flickered. "We chose these worlds carefully. Species that showed adaptability, resilience, the capacity to work together and to fight. If you have found this message, if you have decoded our warnings, then you are one of those successor species. And you need to know. The recording distorted, filled with static. When it cleared, the being's face was different. Older, exhausted. The silence is not gone. We damaged it. We slowed it. But we could not stop it. It lies dormant somewhere in the deep dark between galaxies, and it will return. The mathematics suggest approximately 50,000 years before it becomes active again, before it begins to move once more toward the galactic core. The hologram leaned forward. 50,000 years. We bought you 50,000 years. Use them wisely. Learn from what we left behind. Unite as we united. Fight as we fought. And succeed where we... The recording cut off mid-sentence. No matter what Ji-won tried, she could not retrieve any more. Hyun-woo looked at the others in the chamber, seeing his own horror reflected in their faces. 50,000 years ago, he said quietly, which means it's been 50,000 years. Velthara finished from her hologram. Whatever the silence is, it could already be waking up. And, outside, on the frozen surface of the moon, the assembled ships hung in space. Inside, in a chamber buried in ice for 50 millennia, the representatives of the galaxy's species stared at each other and realized that everything had changed. The Grand Archive of Velthis Prime had never been so crowded. Every major species in the galaxy had sent representatives, and many minor ones too. The discovery on the frozen moon had shaken the foundations of everything they thought they knew about history, about the precursors, and about their own origins. Hyun-woo stood at the center platform, the same place where Archon Velthara had spoken weeks before. Ji-won was beside him, along with Hae-won and a dozen other human researchers. They had spent every waking hour since the discovery analyzing the data from the Precursor facility. "We have completed our analysis," Hyun-woo began. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly as he activated the holographic displays. "What we have discovered changes our understanding of galactic history. More importantly, it changes our understanding of ourselves." The hall was silent. Even Hierophant Raxil, who had spent weeks denying the findings, sat quietly in his section. "The precursors were not a single ancient species," Hyun-woo continued. "They were a coalition of hundreds of species, united against a common threat. They called it the Silence. We still don't fully understand what it is, some kind of entity, phenomenon, or weapon that consumed everything in its path. Entire solar systems disappeared. Images from the Precursor archive played across the screens. Empty spaces in star maps. Last transmissions from dying worlds. The faces of beings from species long extinct. Their final messages filled with fear and determination. The coalition fought for 28,000 years. They lost world after world, species after species. In their final years, they made a decision. If they could not save themselves, they would prepare the future. They identified primitive worlds with species that showed potential for survival and adaptation, and they seeded those worlds with technology, knowledge, and genetic material." Hae-won stepped forward. Her analysis had been the most disturbing of all. "I have analyzed the genetic samples from the facility. What I found is difficult to accept, but the evidence is clear. Many modern species have markers of precursor genetic engineering. They didn't just leave us technology. They shaped our evolution." A being from the Kryn Empire stood abruptly. "You're saying we were created? That our divine heritage is nothing but genetic manipulation?" "Not created," Hae-won said carefully. "Modified, guided. Your species already existed, but the precursors enhanced certain traits. Increased intelligence, better problem-solving abilities, stronger social cooperation instincts. They were preparing you for what they knew was coming." The hall erupted in angry voices. Species that had believed themselves naturally superior now learned they were engineered products. Religious beliefs that had lasted thousands of years crumbled in moments. Velthara raised her hands for silence. She had changed in the weeks since the discovery, becoming less certain of old truths and more open to uncomfortable new ones. How many species were modified? Quote, at least 80 that we can confirm from the genetic database, Hay1 replied. Possibly more. The facility we found was one of many. There could be others we haven't discovered yet. And humans? Someone called out. Were humans also modified? G1 pulled up new data. Her quantum analysis had revealed something that even the human team had struggled to accept. Yes, the genetic markers are clear. Human DNA contains specific sequences that match precursor engineering patterns. But there's something else. She highlighted sections of the human genome. Humans have more precursor modifications than any other species we've analyzed. Significantly more. And the modifications aren't just physical or mental. They're specifically military in nature. Military? Raxil's voice was sharp. Enhanced pattern recognition for tactical situations, G1 explained. Increased adrenaline response for combat scenarios. Better recovery from physical trauma. Improved pack coordination during conflict. Humans weren't just modified to be intelligent. We were modified to fight. Hyunwoo took over again. We found additional data in the archive. The precursors left different levels of information for different species, based on what they thought those species would need. Most species received basic technology and scientific knowledge. But humanity received something else. He activated a new hologram. It showed tactical data, weapon designs, combat strategies. This is military intelligence about the silence, how it moves, how it consumes, and most importantly, how the precursors learned to fight it. This information was specifically encoded for humanity to find. The implications hung heavy in the air. An alien scientist, one of the Novari, spoke quietly. They expected humans to be warriors, defenders. Yes, Hyunwoo confirmed. The precursors studied hundreds of species across the galaxy. They found that humans had certain characteristics that made them uniquely suited for prolonged conflict. Adaptability under pressure, creativity in desperate situations, and a peculiar unwillingness to give up even when defeat seems certain. How arrogant, someone muttered. To think humans are special, Velthara's voice cut through the murmurs. Is it arrogance if it's true? I have reviewed the data. The precursor analysis is comprehensive. They didn't choose humanity because of sentiment. They chose humanity because their projections suggested humans had the highest probability of success against the silence. Ambassador Bo-Ra Nam, the human diplomatic representative, stood from her seat. She had been quiet throughout the presentation, but her expression was troubled. Dr. Kang, what is the current status of the silence? Hyunwoo had been dreading this question. G1 brought up the final analysis. We've been monitoring quantum fluctuations at the galactic rim, she said. Using the data from the precursor archive, we can now identify the signature of silence activity. The news is not good. A new star map appeared. Large sections of the outer rim were highlighted in red. The silence has been dormant, as the precursors predicted. But dormant doesn't mean inactive. It's been slowly working through the galactic rim, consuming uninhabited systems at a rate too slow for anyone to notice. But the rate is increasing. She pulled up calculations. At current rate of expansion, the silence will reach the first inhabited systems in approximately 200 years. Maybe less. Maybe less. The hall went absolutely quiet. 200 years seemed like a long time, but for species that measured history in tens of thousands of years, it was tomorrow. Can we fight it? Velthara asked. The precursors fought it, Hyunwoo said. They slowed it down. They heard it. But they couldn't stop it, and they were hundreds of species working together with technology more advanced than anything we have now. So we're doomed, Raxil said flatly. No. The voice came from the back of the human section. Captain Dong-hyun stood, his military uniform standing out among the academic robes and diplomatic dress of the others. The precursors bought us 50,000 years to prepare. They gave us their knowledge, their technology, and their experience. We're not starting from nothing. We're starting from where they left off. Easy for humans to say, an alien voice called out. You're the chosen ones, apparently. The rest of us are just... What? Support staff? Ambassador Bora stepped forward, her voice firm. That's not what the data says. The precursors modified dozens of species, gave knowledge to hundreds more. They didn't put all their hope in one basket. Yes, they gave humanity specific military information, but they gave other species other advantages. The Velthesians received advanced theoretical physics. The Kryn received high-level organizational structures. The Novari received biological sciences we still don't fully understand. With biological science as well. We still don't fully understand. She gestured to the gathered species. The precursors didn't want humans to fight alone. They wanted all of us to fight together, each contributing what we do best. That's how they fought. That's how they survived as long as they did. And that's the only way we'll survive too, Hyunwoo added quietly. We found one more thing in the archive. A message specifically for whoever discovered the facility first. It said, "Do not let pride divide you. Enter. Do not let fear paralyze you. And do not make our mistake of waiting too long to unite. The silence does not care about your politics, your religions, or your territorial disputes. It only knows how to consume. Stand together or fall separately." Velthara rose from her seat. Her 400 years of life had taught her many things, but perhaps the most important was knowing when to change her mind. I propose we form a coalition, similar to what the precursors created. We share all knowledge from the archive. We begin immediate research into weapons and defenses, and we prepare for what's coming. The Galactic Council will never agree, Raxil said, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. Too many species will deny the threat. Too many will refuse to work with others, especially under human guidance. Then we start with those who will agree, Captain Donghyun said. The precursors didn't wait for everyone to join them. They worked with whoever would stand against the silence. We do the same. We do the same. The debate continued for hours, but something had shifted. The initial shock was fading, replaced by a grim determination. Not everyone believed. Not everyone would help. But enough did. Enough would. As the session finally ended and beings began filing out, Hyunwoo stood alone at the platform for a moment. 20 years he had studied the precursors. 20 years preparing to correct the galaxy's timeline. He had succeeded. But the cost of being right was the knowledge that humanity, and everyone else, was running out of time. 6 months had passed since the revelation at the Grand Archive. The galaxy had split into 3 groups. Those who believed the threat was real, those who refused to accept it, and those who were still deciding. It was the believers who gathered now in a massive orbital station above Earth. The station had been built in record time, a joint effort between humanity and the 17 species who had committed to the Galactic Defense Initiative. Fleet Admiral Jin Woo-song walked through its corridors, marveling at how quickly impossibility had become reality. 6 months ago, he had been commanding Earth's small defensive fleet. Now he commanded ships from 20 different worlds. He entered the main conference room where the Defense Council was meeting. Hyunwoo was there, along with G1, Velthara, and representatives from each participating species. But the person everyone was watching was Dr. Soo-jin Yoon, who stood at the front of the room looking exhausted but excited. "We've done it," Soo-jin announced without preamble. "We've successfully reverse-engineered a precursor weapon system." The room erupted in questions. Soo-jin raised her hands for quiet. "It's not perfect. It's barely functional. But it works. More importantly, we understand the principles behind it. We can build more. She activated a holographic display showing a device that looked nothing like conventional weapons. It was all curves and strange geometric patterns that seemed to shift when you looked at them directly. The precursors didn't fight the silence with energy weapons or missiles. They fought it with quantum disruption devices. The silence exists partially outside our normal space-time. To damage it, you have to reach it where it actually is. How does it work? Jinwoo asked. Honestly, we're still not entirely sure, Sujin admitted. The mathematics is beyond anything we've worked with before, but we've managed to create a stable field that disrupts quantum coherence in a targeted area. Based on the precursor logs, this was effective against silence incursions. Ji-won leaned forward. How effective? Their records show approximately 40% success rate at repelling small incursions. Against larger manifestations, the success rate dropped to around 15%. They needed multiple devices working in coordination to be truly effective. 40% is better than nothing, Velthara observed. How many can we build? That's the problem, Sujin said. The materials required are rare. We can build maybe a dozen devices with current resources. To build enough to defend the galaxy, we'd need to mine specific elements from neutron stars, harvest exotic matter from black hole accretion disks, and synthesize particles that only exist for microseconds in nature. An alien engineer, one of the Novari, spoke up. So we need years of preparation just to build the weapons. And we have 200 years before the silence arrives at inhabited space. Less, Ji-won corrected. Our latest readings show the silence is accelerating. My current projection is 180 years. Maybe 160. The room fell into uncomfortable silence. Jinwoo broke it. Then we start building. We dedicate whatever resources we have. We establish mining operations, research facilities, manufacturing centers. We treat this like the war it is. A war that most of the galaxy doesn't believe in, a Velthesian representative said quietly. The Galactic Council still refuses to acknowledge the threat. The Kryn Empire has forbidden its citizens from participating in the initiative. We're less than 5% of the galaxy's total military and industrial capacity. Hyun-woo had been reviewing data on his personal display. We need to convince more species to join. We need proof that the silence is real and active. We have proof, Velthara said. We have the Precursor archive. We have historical data. Hyun-woo corrected. What we need is current data. Evidence that the silence is active right now. Jinwoo understood immediately. You want to send a ship to the Galactic Rim to observe the silence. Directly. More than observe, Hyun-woo said. I want to engage it. I want to see if Sujin's weapon works. And I want to record everything so we can show the rest of the galaxy what we're facing. That's insanely dangerous, Ambassador Bora said. She had been quiet until now. But her expression was troubled. You'd be sending people into direct contact with something that destroyed the Precursor Coalition. Small incursions, G1 reminded her. The Precursors had success against small manifestations. We're not suggesting we attack a major concentration. Just a small probe to gather data and test our weapons. Jinwoo was already thinking tactically. We'd need a fast ship with the best sensors we have, a volunteer crew, and we'd need to accept that they might not come back. I'll go, Hyun-woo said immediately. Absolutely not, Bora responded. You're too valuable. You're the foremost expert on precursor technology. We can't risk losing you, which is exactly why I need to go, Hyun-woo argued. I know the archive better than anyone. If something goes wrong, if the weapon doesn't work as expected, I'm the one most likely to figure out why. The debate continued for hours, but eventually, Jinwoo made the decision. A small fleet would go to the rim. Hyun-woo would lead the research team. The mission would be observation and limited engagement only. They would gather data, test the weapon, and return with evidence. 3 weeks later, the exploration fleet departed. 5 ships, each from a different species, each crewed by volunteers who understood they might not return. The human ship was the Horizon, a fast research vessel that had been extensively modified with Precursor-derived technology. Hyun-woo stood on the bridge as they made the final jump to the galactic rim. The journey had taken weeks, even with the fastest drives available. Now they hung in space at the edge of the galaxy, staring into the dark between the spiral arms. Sensors are showing anomalies, the sensor officer reported. She was a young woman named Hana, a physicist who had trained under G1. Quantum fluctuations, consistent with precursor descriptions of silence activity. Distance approximately 2 light-years. Captain Dong-hyun, who had volunteered to command the Horizon, studied the readings. That's closer than the projections suggested. The silence is moving faster than we thought. Take us closer, Hyun-woo ordered. But carefully. Keep the quantum disruptor charged and ready. They crept forward, all sensors focused on the anomaly. At first, it looked like nothing. Empty space. But as they got closer, the sensors began to show something wrong. Stars that should have been visible weren't there. Not blocked, not dimmed. Simply absent. As if they had never existed. I'm getting readings now, Hana said, her voice shaking slightly. It's like space itself is being erased. Matter, energy, even space-time coordinates are just disappearing. A small object drifted past their ship. A probe from one of the other vessels, sent ahead to gather close-range data. They watched as it approached the edge of the anomaly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the probe simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris. It was there, and then it wasn't. That's the silence, Hyun-woo whispered. That's what destroyed the precursors. An alert blared. It's moving, Hana called out. The edge of the anomaly is expanding, heading directly toward us. All ships, fall back, Dong-hyun ordered. Maintain minimum safe distance. But the silence was faster than anticipated. Within seconds, it had covered half the distance to the fleet. They had to choose. Run. Or test the weapon, while they still could. Fire the disruptor, Hyun-woo ordered. Sujin, who had also volunteered for the mission, activated the device. The weapon hummed with power that seemed to come from somewhere outside normal physics. A wave of distorted space erupted from the horizon, racing toward the advancing edge of the silence. When they collided, reality itself seemed to scream. The sensors went haywire. Alarms sounded throughout the ship. But when the readings stabilized, they saw something incredible. The silence had stopped. More than that, it had retreated. Just a few hundred meters. But it had definitely pulled back from where the disruptor wave hit it. It works, Sujin breathed. By all the stars, it actually works. Record everything, Hyun-woo commanded. Every sensor reading. Every measurement. This is what we came for. They gathered data for another hour, testing the weapon at different power levels and ranges. The results were consistent. The quantum disruptor could damage the silence, could force it back, could create safe zones in space where it couldn't exist. It wasn't enough to destroy it. Not even close. But it was proof that the silence could be fought. As they prepared to jump back to inhabited space, Hyun-woo stared at the darkness where stars should have been. Somewhere in that emptiness, the precursors had made their final stand. Hundreds of species working together had only managed to slow this thing down. Now it was the new generation's turn. And unlike the precursors, they had advance warning. They had preparation time. And they had proof that resistance was possible. The question was whether it would be enough. The data from the rim changed everything. Video footage of the silence consuming empty space spread across the galaxy within days. Images of the quantum disruptor forcing it back played on 1 billion screens. Species that had dismissed the threat as human fantasy suddenly demanded to know more. The Grand Archive called an emergency session. This time, the hall was even more crowded than before. Species that had boycotted the previous gathering now sent their best scientists and military leaders. Even the Kryn Empire, which had officially denied the silence existed, sent observers. Hyunwoo stood at the central platform again, but he was not alone. Beside him were Captain Dong-hyun, Dr. Sujin, and Archon Velthara. Behind them stood representatives from the 23 species now part of the Defense Initiative. The number had grown. "You have seen the footage," Hyunwoo began. "The silence is real. It is active, and it is moving toward inhabited space faster than our original projections suggested. We now estimate first contact with populated systems in approximately 160 years." The hall was silent. The evidence was undeniable. Even Hierophant Raxil, who had fought against accepting the truth, sat quietly in his section. Sujin stepped forward. "We have also proven that the silence can be fought. The quantum disruptor works. We can build more. But we need resources. We need cooperation. We need the entire galaxy working together." "How many disruptors would we need?" someone asked. "Thousands," Sujin admitted. "Maybe tens of thousands. The silence is vast. To create a defensive perimeter around inhabited space, to establish safe zones, to actively push it back, we need production on a scale that no single species can achieve alone." Fleet Admiral Jinwoo spoke next. His promotion had been rapid, driven by necessity and his proven ability to coordinate multi-species operations. "We've developed a defense strategy based on precursor tactics. We establish fortified positions at key points along the galactic rim. Each position equipped with multiple disruptors working in coordination. We create overlapping fields that the silence cannot penetrate." He pulled up tactical displays. "But this only works if we have enough resources and enough ships. Currently, the Defense Initiative operates with 300 vessels from 23 species. To implement this strategy effectively, we need at least 10,000 ships and the industrial capacity to build and maintain the disruptor network." A representative from the Galactic Council stood. "You're asking for a complete reorganization of galactic priorities. Resources on that scale would require sacrifice from every species." "Yes," Jinwoo said simply. "The precursors sacrificed everything and still lost. We need to sacrifice much and succeed." Velthara added her voice. "I have studied the precursor records extensively. Their mistake was waiting too long to fully commit. They fought a defensive war for thousands of years, always believing they could contain the threat with minimal disruption to normal life. By the time they realized the true scale of what they faced, they had lost too many worlds and too many species. We cannot make the same mistake." Rounder, debate erupted. Some species pledged immediate support. Others demanded more proof. Still others argued about command structure, resource allocation, and territorial concerns. But something fundamental had changed. Nobody was denying the threat anymore. The session continued for 3 days. Slowly, painfully, agreements were reached. The Galactic Defense Coalition was officially formed, separate from, but coordinated with the traditional council. Species could join voluntarily. Those who joined committed resources, ships, and personnel. In exchange, they received precursor technology and access to the defense network. Within a week, 40 species had joined. Within a month, 70. The Kryn Empire remained officially neutral, but several Kryn colonies defied their central government and joined independently. Hyunwoo found himself in a strange position. He had spent his career studying the dead. Now he was helping prepare for a war that wouldn't fully arrive for over a century. The Galactic Coalition appointed him as Chief Historical Advisor, a role that involved decoding more precursor data and training others to do the same. G1 took charge of quantum research, leading teams working to improve the disruptor design. Every month brought small advances. Better range, lower power requirements, easier manufacturing. Dr. Haywan established a biological research division, studying the genetic modifications the precursors had made to various species. Her work revealed more about why humanity had received such extensive military enhancements. The precursors had identified specific genetic markers associated with tactical thinking, stress resilience, and coordinated combat. Humans had all of them in unusual abundance, but she also found something else. Every species that had been modified carried latent abilities that the precursors had enhanced. The Velthesians had an intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics. The Novari could process biological data at incredible speeds. The Kryn had natural organizational abilities that made them excellent coordinators. The precursors didn't just modify us randomly, Haywan explained to the coalition leadership. They created a balanced force. Humans for fighting, Velthesians for theoretical science, Novari for medical and biological support, Kryn for logistics and organization. They designed us to work together. It was a humbling and inspiring revelation. The coalition began reorganizing based on these natural strengths, placing species in roles where they would excel. 5 years after the initial revelation, the coalition held its first large-scale military exercise. 2,000 ships, representing 80 species, practiced coordinated defensive maneuvers at the rim. The exercise tested communication, tactics, and the deployment of 30 quantum disruptors that had been built and positioned along a small section of the frontier. Hyun-woo watched from the command center on the orbital station. Beside him, Ambassador Bo-Ra observed with satisfaction. She had spent years in diplomatic negotiations, convincing hesitant species to join, mediating disputes, and keeping the coalition together. "We're actually doing it," she said quietly. "Building something the precursors would recognize." "We're trying," Hyun-woo replied, "but we're still so far behind where we need to be. 30 disruptors when we need thousands. 2,000 ships when we need tens of thousands. It's been 5 years, Bo-Ra reminded him. We have over 150 years to prepare. The precursors fought for 28,000 years. We have time." The exercise concluded successfully. The ships had worked together smoothly. The disruptors had functioned perfectly. It was a small victory, but a real one. That night, Hyun-woo returned to his quarters and pulled up the precursor archive. He had been studying a particular section for months, one he hadn't shared with the others yet. It was labeled, "Final Protocol Open Only When Ready." G1 had found it years ago on the facility on Mars, but they had been unable to access it. The encryption was beyond anything else in the archive. Hyun-woo had been working on it slowly, carefully, making progress bit by bit. Now he was close. The encryption was yielding. He could see fragments of the data inside, and what he saw both excited and terrified him. The final protocol wasn't just more tactical data. It was something else. Something the precursors had kept secret even from themselves until the very end. A weapon, or a plan. His computer chimed. The final encryption layer broke. The protocol opened. Hyun-woo read through the data, his eyes widening with each line. When he finished, he sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he sent a message to Admiral Jin-woo. G1, Soo-jin, Velthara, and a dozen others. Emergency meeting. Immediately. I've accessed the final protocol. Everything changes. The next morning, the coalition leadership gathered in a secure room. Hyun-woo stood before them, his face showing exhaustion and wonder. The precursors found a way to kill the silence, he said without preamble. Not just slow it. Not just damage it. Actually destroy it. The room erupted in questions. Hyun-woo raised his hands for quiet. But there's a cost. The weapon requires resources and coordination on a scale even larger than what we're already planning. And, he paused, it requires something the precursors could never achieve. It requires every intelligent species in the galaxy working together. Not 70 species. Not 100. Every single one. That's impossible, someone said. We'll never get universal cooperation. The precursors thought so too, Hyun-woo agreed. That's why they called it the final protocol. They developed it, tested it in simulation, and then sealed it away, because they knew they could never implement it. Their galaxy was too divided, too many conflicts, too much distrust. Velthara leaned forward. But they left it for us. Why? Hyun-woo smiled slightly. Because they hoped we might be better than they were. They gave us the warning they never had. They gave us preparation time they never had. And they gave us proof that cooperation works. Everything we've built, everything we've achieved, in just 5 years, the precursors took centuries to accomplish equivalent unity. He pulled up the protocol specifications. This is our path forward. We continue building the disruptor network. We continue expanding the coalition. We continue preparing for direct conflict. But our ultimate goal isn't just to fight the silence. It's to unite the galaxy completely. Because only then can we deploy the final protocol. Only then can we actually win. Jin-woo studied the data. How long to build this weapon? If we had every species committed, full resources, complete cooperation, Hyun-woo calculated quickly, 70 to 80 years. We'd have about 80 years to spare before the silence reaches core worlds. And if we don't achieve universal cooperation, then we fight with what we have, like the precursors did, and we hope it's enough. The meeting continued late into the night. Plans were made. Timelines were established. Diplomatic initiatives were discussed. The final protocol gave them hope, but also a clear mission. They needed to unite the galaxy, and they needed to do it within a human lifetime. As the others filed out, Velthara approached Hyun-woo. You corrected our timeline. You revealed the truth about the precursors. You found the facility. You tested the weapon, and now you've given us a path to victory. For a species that's only been spacefaring for 300 years, humans are remarkably effective. Hyun-woo laughed tiredly. The precursors designed us to be. They needed someone who could do what they couldn't. Someone stubborn enough to keep fighting, even when it seemed hopeless. And are you that stubborn? Hyun-woo looked at the star map on the wall, showing the silence at the rim and the coalition forces arrayed against it. Between them was over a century of preparation time. A century to build an alliance. A century to construct a weapon. A century to save the galaxy. I guess we'll find out, he said. But I think the precursors knew what they were doing when they chose Earth. Humanity doesn't give up. Not when there's still a chance. And they gave us one hell of a chance. Outside the station, the ships of 80 species hung in formation, the first true galactic fleet in 50,000 years. The precursors had failed. But their successors were just getting started.